According to the U.S. Department of Labor, 1.3 million workers earned exactly the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour in 2014. Another 1.7 million earned wages below that rate.
Our most pressing matter when faced by the topic of minimum wage is if the current minimum wage in the United States is fair and whether an individual can sufficiently live upon minimum wage. Right away, we decided to contact Miss Mayer, a high school U.S. history teacher who we thought would have great insight on our topic of minimum wage.
So is the current minimum wage in the U.S. fair? I don't think that it is fair. I think that we need a livable wage in the United States. And so I think there's some issues there. And can an individual sufficiently live upon a minimum wage? I don't think so. I think it's very difficult to live upon a minimum wage in the United States today, especially if you're married or have children.
Next, we visited Mr. Hagan, a local business owner that's also a member of the Social Service Board that was very open to voicing his opinion on minimum wage.
If you look at history, the minimum wage started out at 25 cents in 1938. That equates to about around $4 today. The minimum wage was never set up to technically have people live on it. It was a starting wage for people to get into the workforce, maybe to get educated. Can you live on seven and a quarter an hour? You probably need some help to do it, at that level.
Miss Carrie Fry, a manager at Job Services of North Dakota, was also kind enough to share her viewpoint as well.
Um, let's just say you're looking at a 2-bedroom apartment in our community. That's about over $900 a month. And you have an average car payments over $400 a month. And, groceries federally recommended about $200 a month per person. That $7.25 an hour, $15,000 a year doesn't go very far when you look at what it costs to live. Mm-hmm. So, no, it's not real easy to support yourself. And then if you throw in children on top of that, like daycare costs and stuff like that, that can be like, $11,000 a year. Mm-hmm. When you're only making $15,000 a year, that, you do the math, you add it up, it just doesn't add up. Yeah.
Finally, we interviewed Sonia Elner, an executive director at the Dorothy Day House, about how minimum wage is impacting Americans today.
Well, I would say the people that we're serving are definitely affected. So, it's one of the barriers to get people into housing. So, one of the things that we're looking at is, people having adequate income. So, when we're talking about, like I was talking about the housing programs that subsidize your housing, so you only pay for a portion of that. Mm-hmm. The waiting lists right now are 9 months to a year long. So the best way for people to get into housing is if they have their own income currently. So it just poses a barrier when they're working at jobs that are only making $7.25, mm-hmm. and you really need to be making, I think, like upwards of $16 an hour in order to afford rent at fair market value.
I could talk about people making more money. Clearly, if people made more money, whether it's because the minimum wage was raised or because the just natural market required employers to pay more money, that's better for everybody. Mm-hmm. When people are making more money and they're able to support their families, they buy more things, the economy grows. It's just better if everybody makes more money. However that happens, it is a good thing. Mm-hmm.
After asking for their opinions on minimum wage, we sought out to ask for any suggestions on any possible solutions.
Everybody starts out at someplace, and nobody starts out at the top. I started out at a minimum wage of $1.91 an hour, knowing that I couldn't raise a family on $1.91 an hour. And so I had to continue to improve myself, improve my chances of moving up and making more money.
One of the best ways to raise your earning potential, anyone's earning potential, is through training and getting skills. So if you are a young person and you are looking at going into the workforce, you're going to do much better if you have some skills and some training. If you go to college, if you go to tech school, if you pay attention to what's in demand and go into a field that's really in demand, like right now, most things in healthcare, if one of you ladies decided that you're going to go to college and become an RN, you're golden. You're going to get a job. You're going to get a good job. You're going to make good money. You're going to be able to take that RN degree pretty much anywhere in the nation you want to go and walk into a job, a really good paying job. So one of the ways that as a nation we can really improve our poverty levels is training people and educating them and giving them work skills to do the jobs that are in demand so that they can make that money and support themselves.
We now wondered if minimum wage should be adjusted for inflation happening across the United States, and asked why or why should it not?
I think so. It'd be great if we could pass some legislation where it automatically went up. In my lifetime, it was stuck at $5.25, and then it jumped to $2 in 1 year. And I just think that's crazy. It should be going up all the time as is necessary instead of all at once or never at all.
I think I was also reading that, like, if it were to be adjusted to inflation, it would be like $15, $16 by 2020. That's definitely not gonna
It'd be way up
be
there.
that. Yeah.
No, it does get adjusted by the feds every so often, and at that time they say they're adjusting it for inflation, but when was the last time it was adjusted? I'm sure you guys have been doing research on it probably more than a decade ago, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that it gets adjusted enough.
I think it should be adjusted a little bit, maybe over a 3-year period. Maybe increase it, 30 to 60 cents an hour over a 3-year period.
In terms of affecting the lower class, like if you have a fixed income or if you're making a certain amount of money, anything that happens, like, say somebody's child is sick and then they have to miss work, and they might not be able to afford even the basic things that they were able to afford, or if they got into a car accident and now had to fix their car. So it would allow people to kind of build that nest egg that you hear of, be like, not only be able to afford the like housing, food, childcare, medical bills, but also begin to start saving, because it's hard to think about splurging on things when you go to the store when you can't even barely afford the basic necessities.
The minimum wage helps reduce unemployment and alleviate the effects of poverty by putting more money in the hands of workers and increasing their ability to afford basic cost of living, like housing and food.
Our region, which is the southeastern part of the state, there's only, effectively 0% of the jobs are listed on our website that pay less than $10 an hour. There was 12 of them in this whole area of about 4,000 jobs posted out there right now. So that just kind of goes to show you that even not just in the metro area of Fargo-Moorhead, but all the way down through Wahpeton and that area too of the state, they got to pay more than $7.25 an hour. They got to pay more than $10 an hour to get people to work for them.
In our community, there's a plethora of jobs, like an overabundance, but there's not always jobs that are going to support people in terms of being able to afford housing. And then especially, it's a very competitive job market as well. And so we're a nonprofit. That's something that we always struggle with, making sure that we can compete with other places that pay more. But then those places that pay minimum wage, they're probably hiring lower skilled workers. It's hard to retain people, and it's harder to provide good service in those industries. So it affects it not only from the worker standpoint, but then the employer standpoint, and then just being able to afford basic needs types of items.
When we talk about minimum wage, people often think that a lot of people don't have to work on minimum wage, and I don't think people really realize what the poverty level is and what it buys you and how much things cost. And so I think we need to bring attention to it more than anything.
The minimum wage was never set up to technically have people live on it. It was a starting wage for people to get into the workforce, maybe to get educated and move forward and move up, and obviously increase their wages.
One of the problems America often sees is this disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and when minimum wage gets stuck, it affects people. And I think it definitely affects different areas of the nation. Rural poverty is very different than urban poverty. Very few resources for people that are living in rural poverty. And so I do think it affects different regions. It needs to be looked at in a lot of different ways.
As we learn more and talk more about how the minimum wage affects America today, we realize change needs to be made. How can we have such huge wage gaps across the country where the same job can be paid $7.25 in North Dakota but $11.50 in Washington State? As we watch this dilemma unfold before us, we urge our viewers to be aware and vote to raise the minimum wage when you see it on the ballot. The facts are clear. No one can live off the minimum wage the way it is now.
Sky or a beautiful sunrise. Well, there's so much they hold, and just like them old stars, I see that you've come so far to be right where you are. How old is your soul? Well, I won't give up on us, even if the skies get